Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're really peeling back the layers on an encounter that, on the surface, might just seem like a quiet moment. Picture this with us. It's late afternoon, the sun's casting those long shadows, everything's got that warm, golden look. You can almost feel that gentle breeze, hear the leaves rustling, maybe some kids laughing way off in the distance. And right there, on this weathered bench, is a man named Marcus Davis. He's just lost in a book, finding a bit of sanctuary, trying to escape the grind, the demands of his job in the city, just enjoying the quiet.
But then the whole scene just shifts dramatically because across that same park, Officer Brian Harkin is on patrol. This is his beat, and Brian, he's a veteran officer, right? Over 2 decades on the force. And in his mind, he really believes he knows the city inside out better than anyone. His eyes are scanning, very sharp, very practiced, and they land on Marcus. And that's the moment. Bang! There's this immediate, almost visceral stir in his gut, as the sources describe it.
A stir? What does that even mean here?
Well, he sees a black man sitting alone, too calm, too composed. That's the trigger. That sight, plus absolutely nothing else concrete, sparks this deep suspicion. It's based on, zero evidence. Just this unfounded feeling, and maybe a vague, flimsy lead that was barely anything. But for Brian, that was enough.
And okay, here's where it gets really fascinating, where this whole thing starts to unravel in ways you just wouldn't expect, because this isn't just some simple stop. I mean, yeah, it's clearly prejudice, but it's more than that. The seemingly routine thing, it's about to blow up into this huge revelation about power, about identity, about the kind of deep-seated biases that just lurk beneath the surface, often totally unseen, right? You're going to see how a casual visit to the park turns into this life-altering event. Not just for these 2 men, Marcus and Brian, but somehow for an entire police department. It's quite a turn.
Yeah, it really is. So our mission today is to dive deep into the details, the really intricate details of this one single encounter. We're going to trace it all step by step, from that first little spark of prejudice, that quiet tension building, all the way to the consequences. And they are far-reaching, almost unbelievable consequences that end up forcing actual systemic change. We'll explore it from both sides. You have the officer driven by his assumptions, his gut feelings, and then the man who's unfairly targeted, who handles it with this remarkable, almost tired kind of calm. We're not just looking at what happened, but really digging into why it happened. What does it all mean for things like integrity, justice, and this ongoing challenge, the fight against bias in just everyday life. So let's really get into it.
Okay, to really get the feel for how the tension built up so fast, we need to properly set the scene. We're in Riverside Park. The sources call it a small sanctuary in a bustling city. Nice image. Marcus Davis is there, on that weathered bench, just lost in his book. He's not just, scanning the pages. He's escaping, finding some peace in the quiet rustle of leaves, the distant laughter. He's just trying to clear his head, right? Get away from work stress for a bit. Seems perfectly normal. Totally tranquil.
Yeah, on the surface, totally tranquil. But that calm gets shattered pretty quickly when Officer Brian Harkin shows up. He's patrolling this beat, like we said, territory he's known for over 2 decades. He genuinely thinks he gets the city. He knew this city better than anyone. That's his mindset. And then his eyes lock onto Marcus, sitting alone, looking peaceful, and immediately something in his gut stirred. It's not specific, not like an alarm bell, just this vague, unsettling feeling. A feeling the sources say he'd learned to trust over the years. He kind of elevated it, made it infallible in his own mind. And that gut feeling, that becomes his justification, his internal logic for everything that happens next.
And this is exactly where Brian's bias just snaps into focus, isn't it? The sources really highlight how immediate and unprovoked his suspicion was. It's purely based on Marcus's race and how he looked. A black man sitting alone, too calm, too composed. Think about that. For Brian, just being calm, being still, somehow becomes suspicious. It's this instant leap, seeing normalcy through a filter of distrust.
And what's really revealing is Brian's internal monologue. The sources kind of let us peek inside his head. He's muttering, never seen him around here before. Seems innocent enough, but it quickly takes on this negative weight. He stops, he watches Marcus, trying to place the feeling, trying to make sense of this unease he has. And then he rationalizes it. He almost wills the suspicion into being real. He remembers these vague reports of a suspect fitting a general description that matched Marcus. It's described as a vague, flimsy lead, but it was enough for Brian. That internal justification, flimsy as it was, gave him the green light in his own head. It's classic confirmation bias, isn't it? He had a feeling, a hunch, and he twisted this vague info to fit it. He wasn't looking for evidence, he was just looking for confirmation.
Okay, let's really unpack that. The immediate jump from Guy reading a book to suspect, based on, like you said, really flimsy stuff and a gut feeling. It's staggering when you break it down. It wasn't like there was a crime happening or Marcus was acting genuinely suspiciously. No, it was just his presence, how he looked, and Brian's own internal baseless feeling. It's chilling, really, how fast that unconscious prejudice can just morph into what feels like justification, especially when you think, I mean, imagine a white person doing the exact same thing. Reading a book, would that cause the same stir? Would they need a flimsy lead to justify talking to them? Probably not, right?
Probably not, and that stark contrast really shows the bias at play.
Which brings us straight to Marcus's side of things, because he senses it immediately.
Right. He feels the weight of someone's gaze, looks up from his book, sees Brian staring, and Marcus, he doesn't need it spelled out. He instantly recognizes it. He calls it prejudice masquerading as concern. A suspicion with no basis other than the color of his skin. And the key thing is, this isn't new for him. It's a familiar pattern, a deeply frustratingly familiar pattern.
That's such a critical insight into why he seems so calm. The sources say Marcus has been in situations like this before. He could read the officer's expression easily. He knew the script that was about to play out. He sees the pattern, the sort of implied threat. So what does he do? He doesn't react. Doesn't flinch. He closes his book, slowly, deliberately marking the page. It's a small act of control, right, in a situation where he feels he has none. And then he just met Brian's gaze calmly, measured.
Yeah.
It's this incredibly deliberate response to being targeted for no reason. He's basically de-escalating before Brian even opens his mouth. Not out of fear, but because he knows what's coming and he wants to avoid unnecessary trouble.
And what's truly fascinating there is Marcus's immediate grasp of the situation. Like you said, he's been here before. It shows this profound, almost weary composure that, unfortunately, many people of color have to develop. He knows his reaction right now is crucial. It could set the tone for the whole thing. The source mentions he's not in the mood for this, totally understandable, but he's determined not to give Brian any excuse, any perceived reason to escalate things. His calm actions, closing the book slowly, keeping his hands visible, it's like a conscious defense mechanism against more unfounded accusations. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many times do you have to go through something like that before this kind of knowing calm becomes automatic, like a survival skill?
That constant need to manage other people's biases. There's a term for that, isn't there? Racial battle fatigue.
Exactly. Racial battle fatigue, the emotional, the psychological toll of constantly navigating these microaggressions, these overt acts of prejudice, it's exhausting.
And the tension just keeps ratcheting up, even with Marcus being so deliberate and calm. Brian's hand tightens on his baton. You can almost see it. And Marcus's steady, unafraid look, instead of reassuring Brian, it actually unnerved him, made him more suspicious. Brian mutters, "Let's see what this guy's up to," and starts walking towards Marcus, his posture getting stiffer with every step. The sources point out that Brian specifically dislikes Marcus's calmness, the lack of fear.
Yeah, it's unsettling to Brian. He expects fear or guilt or something, and Marcus isn't giving it to him. That refusal to fit Brian's expectation just fuels the suspicion more.
So when Brian reaches the bench, the conversation starts. Polite on the surface, maybe?
Polite-ish. Brian's tone is described as polite, but there was an edge to it. Marcus picks up on the underlying suspicion right away. Marcus keeps his voice calm and even, deliberately keeping his hands visible, resting them on the closed book. A very clear signal of non-aggression, trying to cooperate without validating the premise. But Brian's not really interested in answers. He immediately starts fishing. "What brings you out here today than you from around here?" He's just looking for anything, any little thing to justify that feeling gnawing at him. He's not actually listening to Marcus's simple, truthful answers. He wants to find something that fits his narrative.
And then this brings us to that critical point, that crossroads. Marcus knows his rights, but he also knows the reality of the situation. De-escalation versus assertion.
Right. Brian gets more confrontational visually. Then he drops the question, "Mind if I see some ID?"
Such a loaded question in this context.
Totally. And Marcus faces this dilemma. He knew his rights. He knew perfectly well he wasn't obligated to show ID just for sitting in a public park. Absolutely not. But he also knew refusing, well, it could escalate the situation quickly, turn this baseless interaction into something much worse, much more dangerous.
So what does he do? He stays strategic.
Incredibly strategic. He asks directly, very calmly, "Am I under arrest?" Then follows up, "Is there a law against that?" Reading a book, he means. He's asserting his rights clearly, calmly, but not aggressively. Brian, though, he just bristles at this. Marcus's calmness again, that refusal to be intimidated, it really gets under Brian's skin. He feels like he's losing control of the situation, and that's when Brian escalates. His hand moves towards his holster, threateningly, and he says, "You will be if you don't cooperate."
Wow. Using the threat of arrest just to force compliance when there's absolutely no legal basis.
It's pure assertion of power, not law enforcement.
So Brian tries to justify it somehow.
Yeah, he falls back on that weak excuse, claims Marcus fit the description of someone we're looking for. But even he knows how weak the excuse sounded. Marcus, still calm, challenges him directly, voice level, and what description is that?
Leaving Brian completely flat-footed.
Exactly. Brian has no good answer. He knows it. He feels that flush of humiliation. But his pride, his refusal to lose face, losing control, just won't let him back down, so he snaps. Voice sharp now. "Don't get smart with me. Show me some ID now." It's all about his ego at this point, his authority, not justice, not procedure.
So Marcus has to make a call. Push back or comply?
Yeah, there's this tense moment. They lock eyes. The air is thick. Marcus knows he could push back more. He knows his rights. But he also understands with this deep, weary wisdom that doing that could make this situation even more dangerous. It's a calculated risk assessment, sadly. So, strategically, he decides to comply for now. He reaches into his pocket slowly, deliberately, making sure his movements are obvious, non-threatening, pulls out his wallet. Brian just snatches the ID, barely glances at it. The name, Marcus Davis, means nothing to him then. It doesn't matter anyway. He's already decided who Marcus is.
And then comes the arrest. Unbelievable.
The unjust arrest. Brian orders him, "Stand up, turn around." Marcus feels this huge surge of frustration, this deep sense of injustice, but he consciously pushes it down, stays calm, even though he feels people nearby could feel their eyes on him. This public humiliation. He lets Brian cuff him without resisting. It's the silent, almost resigned acceptance, born of bitter experience, you feel.
Does Brian have any second thoughts at this point?
The sources suggest he does. Even as he's tightening the cuffs, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that he was making a mistake. A little flicker of doubt. But his pride wouldn't let him stop now. That's critical. He had a chance to self-correct, but his ego, his need to be in control, overruled it. Meanwhile, Marcus feels this profound weariness. It's the exhaustion of knowing that despite all his accomplishments, all his efforts, he was still seen as just another black man in the eyes of too many people like Officer Brian Harkins.
That's incredibly powerful, the weight of that constant perception.
It really is. And the image of Marcus settled into the seat, the cold metal of the handcuffs biting into his wrists, just wondering how this day, like so many others, had gone so wrong. It just drives home the personal cost, the deep injustice of it all.
So they head to the precinct. What's the atmosphere like in the car? Still tense.
Oh, definitely. These unspoken power dynamics are just simmering. Brian's still uneasy. That gnawing feeling won't go away. He can't forget how Marcus looked at him in the park, that calm, unafraid, like he knew something Brian did. It just keeps eating at him, makes him question himself maybe, but his pride won't let him actually admit it.
And Marcus. What's going through his mind?
Marcus is quiet. His hands are cuffed behind him. His mind focused on what would happen next.
Yeah.
He knew the system, knew how things could escalate, the bureaucracy, the potential dangers. But here's the crucial part, the source of his composure. He also knew his own power, the authority that came with his position, an authority that Officer Harkin had absolutely no idea about.
Ah, okay, so he knows something Brian doesn't. That explains a lot.
Completely. This quiet knowledge, this confidence in how this will eventually play out, it's such a stark contrast to Brian's confused arrogance and inner turmoil. Marcus is playing the long game.
Does Brian keep pushing him in the car?
Yeah, his bias really comes out in the car. He keeps digging, voice full of disbelief. "What were you really doing in that park?" Marcus calmly repeats, patiently, that he was just reading. And Brian just scoffs, tone dripping with contempt. "A guy like you just sitting around reading. You expect me to believe that?"
Wow. A guy like you, that says it all, doesn't it?
It really does. It's loaded. And Marcus picks up on it immediately, just a subtle raise of his eyebrow. Then he asks, very pointedly, forcing Brian to actually hear his own words. "A guy like me? And what does someone like me look like, officer?" The sources say Brian didn't answer. He couldn't. He knew what he was implying, knew how it sounded, but he wasn't going to admit to that kind of blatant prejudice. His frustration just ramps up because Marcus stays calm, continues to unsettle him, continues to defy his stereotypes. It shows how deep Brian's biases run. He doesn't even fully clock the prejudice in his own words until Marcus calls him on it.
Okay, so they arrive at the precinct. What's the scene?
It's the usual buzz, the sources say. Busy booking area, officers filing reports, phones ringing, that constant hum. Brian leads Marcus through, pointedly ignoring the looks they're getting. And then you start seeing these little signs, these cracks in Brian's authority. Officer Jenkins at the desk looked up surprised. There's this quick flicker of recognition in his eyes, a moment of realization, but he masks it fast, almost instinctively. Marcus, who's watching everything, noticed the brief hesitation filing it away in his mind. He's already putting the pieces together.
Jenkins recognizes Marcus, or suspects something's wrong.
It seems like recognition, and that's huge, because it means someone else in the system knows who Marcus is. Jenkins then tells Brian, fairly casually, that he needs to take Marcus to Captain Laura Bennett's office. Brian visibly tenses up at this. He knows Captain Bennett's reputation. Tough, but fair. A stickler for procedure. Someone who demands things be done by the book. He clearly didn't want to involve her yet, maybe hoped to handle it quietly, but now he has no choice. Marcus sees Brian's tension, notes the uncertainty, the first crack in the armor. The power balance is definitely shifting.
So they go to Captain Bennett's office. What happens there?
The confrontation is intense, but quiet. Brian gives his clipped, defensive version. Caught this guy in the park, acting suspicious, wouldn't cooperate. Bennett looks coolly from Brian to Marcus. And just like Jenkins, there's that telltale flicker of recognition in her eyes. Again, quickly masked. She's playing this very carefully, waiting to see how Brian handles it.
She starts questioning Brian then.
Immediately, puts him right on the spot. Calm authority. Is that so? And then the direct hit. And did you have probable cause to arrest him? Brian hesitates. You can almost see him squirming, feeling the ground beneath him start to shift. His justification is crumbling. He offers that weak excuse again. He wouldn't cooperate, Captain. But it sounded weaker this time. No legal weight at all. Then Bennett makes her move, asserts her authority. Officer Harkin, why don't you step outside for a moment? I'd like to speak with Mr. Davis alone.
Ooh, that must have thrown Brian.
Totally taken aback, but he can't argue. He reluctantly leaves, leaving Marcus alone with the captain.
And does Bennett's tone change once Brian's gone?
Instantly. Complete shift. From stern captain to something much more understanding. Mr. Davis, she says, voice calm, apologetic. I apologize for this misunderstanding. Marcus, still composed, still strategic, replies quietly. No need to apologize, Captain. You're just doing your job. It's gracious, acknowledges her role without excusing Brian.
And then comes the reveal.
Bennett admits it quietly, sincerely. I'm aware of who you are, but I'd appreciate if we kept that under wraps for now. I need to handle this situation carefully.
Which brings us to that massive question. Why didn't Marcus just say who he was earlier? In the park.
Right.
In the car.
Right. Why wait?
His answer is incredibly powerful. It's the core of this whole thing, really. He says, because it shouldn't matter, Captain. My identity shouldn't be the reason he decides to treat me with respect.
Wow, just wow.
Exactly. It's a mic drop moment, a profound statement about principle. And Bennett gets it instantly. She nods, understanding the deeper issue. It forces everyone to confront the real problem. Brian's bias, not Marcus's job title. His silence was deliberate, a form of protest, a teaching moment.
So after that reveal, things must change fast. The uncoupling.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the tension is thick. Bennett calls Brian back in. Her voice is firm, no nonsense, orders him, Mr. Davis here is not the man you were looking for. You'll release him immediately. Brian is just stunned. Stands there stammering, what? But Captain Bennett cuts him off, repeats the order, leaves no room for argument.
How does Brian react to actually taking the cuffs off?
You can just imagine the weight of his mistake crashing down. His hand is actually shaking slightly as he fumbles with the cuffs. That metallic click sounds loud in the quiet office. Marcus, poised as ever, says his final words to Brian. Not angry, but with this chilling, quiet authority. Thank you, officer. But the sources say there was an undertone of finality. He then just quietly leaves, leaving Brian totally alone with this awful, sinking feeling. That simple thank you is almost more devastating than yelling would have been. It's a polite but absolute dismissal.
And the consequences for Brian come quickly after that. Suspension.
Immediately. And the full weight of the revelation hits him hard. He's back at his desk but can't focus. The unease gnawed him. He's still trying to process the sheer scale of his screw-up. Then Captain Bennett's summons comes, cold and direct. Officer Harkins, my office now. The reckoning is here.
What does Bennett say to him? Does she reveal who Marcus is?
She gets straight to it. No preamble. Do you have any idea who Marcus Davis is? Brian, still kind of bewildered, says no. And then Bennett drops the bomb. It hits him like a physical blow. Marcus Davis isn't just some guy in the park. He's a special agent, one of their top agents. Brian just whispers, shocked, an FBI agent. You can feel the ground drop out from under him. He didn't just arrest an innocent man reading a book. He arrested a top federal agent based on nothing but his own prejudice. The enormity of it just starts to sink in. Dread. Cold dread.
And Bennett really lays into his bias, right? Makes it clear that wasn't the point anyway.
Absolutely. Her words are sharp, direct. That's the problem, Harkins. It shouldn't have mattered who he was. Your actions were based on assumptions and prejudices, not on any real evidence. She spells it out. You can't arrest someone just because they don't look like they belong in a park. Brian wants to argue, defend himself somehow, but the sources say the words just won't come. Deep down, that cold truth hits him. Captain Bennett was right. He let his biases run the show, completely overriding protocol, justice, everything.
What's the immediate fallout for Brian then?
The price is steep. He's placed on temporary leave while we investigate this incident. Bennett warns him there's going to be an official review and potentially disciplinary action up to and including termination. Termination. That word hangs there like a death sentence for Brian. His whole career, over 2 decades, his whole identity is tied up in being a cop. Losing it all is almost too much to bear. But in this moment of stark clarity, he knows he had no one to blame but himself. That internal accountability, even forced like this, is huge.
And this forces him to really question himself, his whole career.
For the very first time, yeah. He's forced into this really uncomfortable self-doubt, thinking maybe he wasn't the upstanding officer he had always believed himself to be. Maybe his biases and prejudices guided his actions more than he was willing to admit. It's a painful demolition of his self-image, but necessary.
And he remembers Marcus's gaze differently now.
Totally. That haunting image of Marcus's calm, unflinching gaze comes back, but now he understands it. Marcus had seen right through him, knew exactly what was happening even before Brian himself did. Understood the prejudice from moment one. It's a chilling realization for Brian, understanding just how transparent his own biases were to the man he was targeting. The power dynamic has completely irreversibly flipped.
So Brian faces the official review. Judgment Day, essentially. How's he feeling?
He's a wreck. Standing outside the room, heart pounding, knows every word he said in the next hour could determine the future of his career. He catches his reflection, sees himself looking older, more worn, stressed out, tries to straighten his uniform, project control he doesn't feel. That self-doubt is heavy on him.
What's the atmosphere like inside the review room?
Intense, very tense, thick with judgment. You've got stern-faced officials from internal affairs, high-ranking officers, serious faces all around. And then the real gut punch for Brian. Marcus Davis is there, sitting calmly at the table. His eyes are locked on Brian, studying him. It's that same calm, unflinching look, but now it has this undeniable edge of quiet authority. His presence just transforms it from a formal inquiry into this deeply personal reckoning for Brian. The tables haven't just turned, they've been completely flipped.
Captain Bennett starts the review.
Yeah, she opens it formally, crisp, professional, states the purpose, to determine the appropriateness of your actions during the arrest. Brian tries to justify himself, grasping at straws, repeats his week's story, saw him in the park, matched the description, tall, black male, early 40s, acting suspiciously. Claims Marcus didn't want to show me my ID right away, seemed like he was hiding something. But the words sound hollow, even to him. No conviction, just weak excuses.
And Marcus doesn't let that slide.
Not at all. He cuts in calmly but firmly. I was reading a book, Officer Harkins, he says, voice even. Not exactly the behavior of a criminal on the run. Brian visibly flinches but keeps staring at Bennett, avoiding Marcus's eyes. Then an internal affairs officer asks the killer question. Did you consider that your assumptions might have been influenced by factors other than protocol? Brian falters, voice shaky, offers that pathetic admission. I didn't mean to profile him, I was just doing my job. Clinging to that idea, but it's crumbling right in front of everyone.
And Marcus delivers another powerful rebuke.
He leans forward, gaze fixed on Brian, nails the fundamental point. Your job is to protect and serve, Officer Harkin, not to judge people based on their appearance. Brian feels this wave of guilt, deep shame. He knows deep down he had been in law enforcement long enough to know when he was wrong. It forces him to confront the real impact of his actions.
Bennett then broadens the scope, right?
Yeah.
Makes it about the whole department.
Exactly. She reinforces the stakes. This review isn't just about what happened that day. It's about the mindset that led to your actions. We need to ensure that every officer in this precinct is upholding the values of fairness and justice. Brian gets that awful sinking feeling, realizes this is bigger than him. It's about whether he was fit to continue wearing the badge. The whole department's integrity is on the line here, showing how one officer's bias can damage public trust systemically.
Then Marcus speaks again, shifting the focus.
Yeah, he stands up, commands attention, shifts it from just punishing Brian to a call for real change. He acknowledges the job is tough, is a difficult job, but insists firmly, we can't allow those bad decisions to go unchecked. And here's his crucial point. This isn't just about holding Officer Harkins accountable, it's about ensuring that something like this doesn't happen again. He frames it smartly as an opportunity for change, a catalyst for reform, not just discipline.
How does Brian take that?
He listens, heart heavy, finally facing the truth. His biases had blinded him completely. Bennett acknowledges Marcus's words, their importance, then the decision. Brian stays on temporary leave, told to reflect on what's been said. Really think about it. Brian just nods numbly, overwhelmed. As he leaves, he can't even look at Marcus, crushed by the weight of his actions and their consequences, which now feel enormous. It shows how accountability, even painful, can spark those bigger conversations about change.
So the investigation wraps up pretty quickly. What does it find?
Yeah, it's unambiguous. Captain Bennett reviews the final reports. All the witness statements are consistent. They paint a clear picture of Brian's behavior. And the body cam footage, clear and unambiguous. It shows everything. Brian's aggression, his threatening tone, his hostile body language, the unnecessary force. It's damning.
Does someone confirm this to Bennett?
Detective Harper, her second in command, he tells her straight, voice solemn. Not good, Captain. Most of the witnesses are pretty clear, and the body cam footage backs them up definitively. With all that evidence, Bennett's decision is firm, though likely painful for the department. Officer Harkin will be terminated from his position, a decisive consequence for abusing power.
So with Brian terminated, the focus shifts to what next? To reform.
Exactly. It moves beyond just Brian. Marcus immediately asks Bennett the key question. Do you believe this decision will lead to real change within the department? He's looking at the bigger picture. Bennett's answer is honest, thoughtful. It's a step in the right direction. But I also know that firing one officer isn't enough to address the deeper issues at play. She knows systemic problems need more than just one firing.
Marcus agrees with that assessment.
Completely. You're right, he says. This is about more than one officer. It's about the culture within the department, the training officers receive, and the biases that can influence their decisions, often without them even realizing it. And connecting this to the bigger picture, like the sources suggest, it really underlines that true systemic change means tackling that underlying culture, those ingrained mindsets, not just patching things up when one person messes up badly. It's about fixing the foundation.
Does Bennett outline any specific changes? Like training?
She does. Shows real commitment. We are revising our training program, she says, to include more comprehensive education on racial bias and de-escalation techniques. Firm resolve there. She also mentions implementing more rigorous oversight and accountability measures. And just so we're clear, de-escalation isn't just calm down. It's a whole set of skills. Active listening, showing empathy, clear commands, non-threatening posture. Things clearly missing from Brian's approach.
And the racial bias education, what does that typically involve?
Usually things like implicit association tests, helping officers see their own unconscious biases, scenario-based training to practice how to mitigate those biases in real time, and cultural competency workshops, trying to build better understanding across different communities.
So more training, more oversight.
Right. Bennett talks about more rigorous oversight. Maybe that means stricter reviews of body cam footage, maybe stronger citizen review boards, maybe analyzing stop and arrest data more closely to spot patterns of bias. And Marcus, he offers his full support, acknowledges it's going to take more than just policy changes. It's about changing the mindset of the officers, a real culture shift. Then he makes this incredible offer. I'm willing to work with you, Captain. It's about creating a safer, more just system for everyone. He's turning his own awful experience into something constructive.
That's amazing. How does Bennett react?
Deeply grateful. Recognizes his experience and insight will be invaluable. It's this powerful moment of collaboration, right? Taking something so negative and unjust and using it as fuel for positive change. It really shows how sometimes the biggest reforms come out of the toughest situations.
Does Brian appear again after the termination?
Yeah, there's one last scene, his final appearance at the precinct. It's kind of poignant, almost somber. He's there collecting his stuff, dressed in plain clothes, not his uniform anymore, face drawn, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He's clearly humbled, carrying the weight of it all. He goes up to Marcus, voice low, awkward, tries to apologize, sort of. I didn't mean for things to turn out like this. Still focused on his intent, maybe?
How does Marcus respond to that?
Marcus is blunt, impactful. but also you feel trying to make Brian understand. It's not about what you meant, Officer Harkins, he says. It's about what you did and the impact it had. Intentions don't excuse actions, cuts right through any self-pity. Then he challenges him, doesn't just dismiss him. You have the opportunity to learn from this, to become a better person because of it. Brian just slumps, shoulders drop, gives a hesitant nod, then leaves, carrying that hard truth with him. It's a harsh lesson, but it highlights that accountability isn't just punishment. It's about the potential for real growth, real change, even after a huge mistake.
What do Bennett and Marcus say after Brian leaves?
Bennett watches him go, reflects quietly, I hope so, but it's out of our hands now, acknowledging you can't force personal transformation. Then she and Marcus share this moment of understanding. They both know change takes time, but it's encouraging. They get that they're building a new foundation, and that's a long, hard process.
And Marcus loves the precinct with what feeling?
Hope. Maybe cautious hope. As he leaves for the last time, he consciously looks around, notes the subtle shifts in the environment. Small things, maybe. A new bulletin board about bias awareness. Maybe just a different energy from the other officers. Faint signs, but signs nonetheless. His final thought is resolute. He knows change wouldn't come easily, understands the inertia, but he also knew that it was necessary. He's more ready than ever now to continue the fight for justice. His personal ordeal has turned him into an even stronger advocate for reform.
So bringing it all back to that quiet park scene, you can really see it now, how that one single moment of prejudice, just fueled by unchecked bias, spiraled completely out of control. An FBI agent unjustly arrested, and that domino effect leading to this painful but vital process of introspection and actual systemic reform in a whole police department. It's an incredible ripple effect from something that started so small, so prejudiced.
Yeah, the takeaways here are huge. We've seen the devastating impact individual actions driven by bias can have, even if it's unconscious bias. We've seen how crucial accountability is not just as punishment, but as a catalyst for change. And maybe most importantly, this story shows the sheer courage needed to face uncomfortable truths. Personally, like Brian eventually had to, but also institutionally. True justice, like this story shows, often means dismantling those ingrained mindsets, those cultural norms, not just punishing mistakes here and there.
And Marcus's choice, not revealing his identity right away. That was so deliberate, so powerful. He said it shouldn't matter. His identity shouldn't be why he gets treated with basic respect. Respect should be fundamental, based on human rights, human dignity, not your job title, not who you are. That really hits home, thinking about the unconscious biases we all navigate or maybe even hold in our own lives.
Exactly. Which leads us to our final thought for you, the listener, something to really chew on. If one brief, seemingly small encounter in a park can expose such deep biases and spark a whole movement for change, well, what hidden biases might we be carrying around unknowingly in our daily interactions? What are those gut feelings we trust without really questioning them? And maybe more importantly, how can each of us actively work on cultivating a mindset that values critical thinking, real empathy, objective observation, over just falling back on ingrained assumptions? How do we make sure we're not accidentally perpetuating those same cycles of injustice, even in small ways? Because that journey towards a more just world for everyone, it really does start right there with examining our own lens, our own perceptions, the hidden corners of our own minds.